I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, December the 3rd, brought to you in part by Real Max Herd Health Mineral Programs, providing ranchers with the tool to ensure 15 to 30% forage savings to bring profits back to ranching. For more information, go to realmax.net. Struggling for steady, really? Early this week, the board's been fairly supportive, and we just figured that our fats would be steady to $1 or $2 higher, and that's what we were kind of counting on. And here we are in the middle of the week, and we're struggling for steady. We've seen the Northern Plains cave kind of early, and some of your weak sisters caving at markets or prices that were below last week, and some of them significantly lower. And now your Southern Plains is trying to get started selling, and they're struggling to hold steady, and that just doesn't really make sense with lighter numbers of market-ready cattle in the Southern Plains, but that's the way it is. Your packers are trying to hold on to their margins because their wholesale prices on beef, their box beef cutout values are starting to fade significantly now that we've got over the seasonal increase, because we've gotten past the point where their end users can buy for the holiday season. But we're struggling for steady. Cash feeders are going down all of a sudden. Your bigger feeder cattle, and they're tanking right as our feeder cattle futures have been very impressive this week, and your analysts that watch that thing are noticing that we've got lighter placements around. They're wanting to get out of their short, so they're having to make a long position. It's causing your feeder cattle futures to go up, but your cash feeders are going down. There's just no place to put them anymore. We know that we've got record numbers of cattle on feed, and there's just not much vacancy in these feedlots for bigger feeder cattle. But your calves are hot. We've got your farmer feeders in the Corn Belt in the Midwest. They like to feed calves. They like those fancy calves, those reputation ranch deals, and they're really getting aggressive on those. And most all those calves are a long time weaned. They look really good, and that's what those guys are going off of, mostly just in the north. But in the Southern Plains, we have finally seen enough moisture in your hard red winter wheat regions that we're seeing some wheat around. And normally they would have turned out at November 15th, but here we are first part of December, and now they're wanting to get in and buy some to turn out, and it's going to be a shorter season because early to mid-March they're going to have to pull those things off, and we're not even sure if that wheat's going to last that long because there's not a lot of moisture out there. But they just can't stand to see that wheat out there and not have something grazing it. But pretty good market on calves, and good demand for calves. Not so much for your bigger feeders, and they're starting to fade quite a bit. But I don't want to turn this report into an obituary, but there's a couple of guys that have passed here in the last week or so that I want to talk about. They were instrumental in my life. They're big operators, and likely some of you guys in the areas might know them. But a good friend of mine named Dean Campbell from Clovis, New Mexico. He ran cattle, he farmed quite a bit, and he had cattle trucks. And I've loaded more of his trucks than I can even count. I tell you what, he was our main trucker. When I was a kid, my dad was buying a lot of cattle in the country at that time, and Dean Campbell was our trucker. It didn't matter, he might have had 7 or 8 trucks at one time, but if we needed 15 or 20, we just called Dean and he handled the whole thing. But he was a great guy. He was a big man. And I never saw him eat, and I never saw him when he wasn't working, so it doesn't hardly seem fair. But Dean Campbell passed away last week, and I really hate that. He had heart troubles, and feel for his family and friends there around Clovis, New Mexico. Another one, Matt Kehoe, just passed away on Wednesday. And Matt Kehoe was from Texline, Texas. He was a big operator. He was an old cowboy. He did a jillion deals. He was kind of a mentor to my father, and my father did a lot of business with Matt Kehoe, and I tell you, he was a straight shooter and a really good guy. We're going to miss him. Let's talk about your futures market on Wednesday. Your December live cattle futures up 7 cents at 110.70. and that's about par where things are selling right now. But we felt like we had enough leverage where we could gain a little more ground in that. February live cattle up 75 cents, so that kind of tells you the disparage between there, and we think we got good things to go to as we get into the early spring, but up 75 cents at 113.92. You go on out from there on your live cattle, and we're up a nickel to up 35 cents. January feeder cattle up 15 cents, and they've been up all week, up big on Monday, but sitting at 141.80, where a real-time index, the most updated index on 800-pound steers, is now under 139. March feeder cattle up 32 cents at 140.97. Going out from there on your feeder cattle, they weren't doing a whole lot, from down a nickel to up 25 cents, so fairly steady there. Your fat cattle trade, and I mentioned it, it's a shame that we're struggling for steady here, but your northern guys, they kind of caved. A few of your smaller farmer feeders that don't have a good relationship with packers and don't really get their cattle sold well whenever it comes time for them to finish them. They may only have cattle ready once or twice a year, but that's hurt the market. Iowa had 7,400 head confirmed on Wednesday, from 106.5 up to over 110, and that 110 would be steady, but they did have some of those lower sales, but dress sales were fairly steady from 172 to 174. Nebraska about 8,500 head, and they were pretty much steady across the board. Live sales from 110 to 111, dress sales from 172 to 174. Now, our Southern Plains trade has been kind of different than normal. About 1,800 head, and that's we haven't established the market yet, but starting to get close to it. 1,800 head in Kansas, from 110 to 112. We never see a $2 spread in the Southern Plains, but we're seeing it. But your weighted average on those sales on Wednesday was around 110.30. So that's weak. And that doesn't bode well for the market. But they had a few dress sales at 174, and that sure be steady. Now Texas had about 7,000 head confirmed on Wednesday, from that 110 to 112, just like Kansas. And you ask around, and they're talking about the regionals giving the 112. They're not confirming that the majors paid the 112. Well, where are we getting the regional trade out of Texas? It's got to be South Texas beef down there, Corpus Christi, and they are coming up in there and buying some of those cattle there. And it's the old Sam Cain plant down there. And we've gotten past their problems whenever they had some foreigners come in there running it. They are paying up for those cattle. Their money's good. Dan Mercer there, a friend of mine, a Canyon, Texas native, he went down there to be head of procurement and kind of run an outfit down there. He's doing a hell of a job, and he's coming up there and buying cattle when he needs them from his folks that he knows in the Texas Panhandle. So 110 to 112 there on the spread, but their weighted average on the Texas sales was about 111, and that would be steady. Box beef cutout values on Wednesday afternoon down pretty good on the choice, 240.89, but above 240, and that's a pretty good level right there. But your packers don't like to give up margin at all, but that 240.89 was down 251. Select cuts on the Wednesday afternoon, 222.95, down just 13 cents. Slaughter's been pretty aggressive so far this week, 361,000, that's up 1,000 from last week, and up 3,000 from the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. Joplin Regional Stockyards got their value-added wean back special here on Thursday. About 7,000 head. They were thinking 6,000. You think, my gosh, Joplin's marketed so many cattle around the four-state area, they ought to be out of them. No, that's where cattle come from. I tell you what, they have so many cattle in that area. And that is cattle country right in there, but about 7,000 now, probably 1,000 more than they were expecting just a few days ago. And then as soon as they get done with that weanback special on Thursday, they've got the prime time video auction there from Joplin Regional Stockyards. Another 5,000 or 6,000 head going to be offered on that. Ozarks Regional Stockyards, just east of there in West Plains, Missouri, they've got their pre-vac special. That's another value-added sale on Friday, start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Both of those sales and the primetime video you can find on dvauction.com. You can view and bid right there. Ogallala, Nebraska's got a big special coming up on Thursday. Don't miss that. That's going to be a premium type sale too. I want to talk to you about DV Auction. You know, that's who I'm employed by and who supplies all this information. And talk about their production sales, and our fall production sales are getting big. Of course, we do most of the business in the spring, but look at the kind of the summary of the production sales in November. We had total bids of 12,000 bids on DV Auction Console, and that might have something to do with the COVID, people not showing up to the sale and they're just logging on and bidding online there. But total dollar bids of $36.8 million. They had total purchases in dollars of over $7 million. That's on DV Auction Console there on your production sales. A lot of them are heifer and female sales and cow sales there. Some bull sales too this fall. But they had total lots sold of over 2,600 lots in the production sale sector of DV Auction there. And if you guys have a production sale coming up, either later this fall or into the winter or especially this spring, get a hold of us at DV Auction. You guys, especially you guys that haven't used internet bidding before, it's going to be hard to get a crowd at your sale. You can get a hold of us at DV Auction and you think, well, we're having it way out here in the country. We've got air cards and we can run a sale just about anywhere that you're at. You'll be surprised how affordable it is, and surprised at how much you can open it up to a whole world of bidders there. We've got we've got unbelievable numbers of bidders that have bought online and will get online, guys you've never even heard of, that will bid on your replacement stock on there. And get a hold of us at DV Auction, and let's get your sales scheduled for spring too. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV Auction late in the day on Wednesday sitting at 138.77. That's down 21 cents from Tuesday's close there, and just a little bit weaker, like I talked earlier about. Guys aren't pressing on these big feeding type cattle right now. Talk about your big brick and mortar sales that happened on Wednesday. OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, 10,300 head there. Compared to 2 weeks ago, they were completely closed last week for Thanksgiving, but compared to 2 weeks ago, feeder cattle $2 to $5 lower. And they call demand light to moderate. That's scarier than anything is the seasoned market reporters calling that demand light to moderate for feeder cattle. They'll buy them if they kind of come into the range, but they're not going to push the envelope on them. Calves $4 to $9 higher, and demand very good there, good to very good on your calves, so your calf gap is starting to widen again on feeder cattle, even though they still want those bigger cattle because feed costs are getting heavier. But there's fewer and fewer of them that can make the April board now, so that's kind of why our feeder cattle demand is backing off a little bit. Winter livestock, Dodge City, Kansas, 2,900 head there compared to 2 weeks ago there. Feeder steers steady, but your heavier weight feeder steers weighing over 8.5, $3 to $4 lower, and just in 2 weeks there. And some of those heavier feeders there being a little bit softer and not as hard, they're not thinking that they're going to be able to make the April board on those, so they don't hedge quite as well. But 3 to 4 lower on those big feeder steers weighing over 8.5. Steer calves $3 higher, similar to what we've seen around, what I've been talking about. Feeder heifers $1 to $3 lower, and heifer calves steady. Bassett Livestock Auction, Bassett, Nebraska, had a sale on Wednesday there. Not as big as normal, and like I've been telling you guys, these receipts are smaller. There's not as many cows around. They had 2,000 head for the special on Wednesday. Compare that to a year ago when they had 3,400 head. And even up in the Sandhills, there's just not as many cows around, not as many calves to sell. Steer calves were $5 higher, heifer calves $2 higher. Look at this top quote out of Bassett, Nebraska. 106 head, 664 pound fancy steers bring 169.75. But the top quote that I saw for the day on Wednesday, and your Zach Tran top quote from the day, come out of Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota. 85 head, 704-pound steers, bring 155.50. And that's your feeder flash for